Hello and welcome to Nithrania YouTube channel. You're watching another episode of the Game in a Nutshell series designed for explaining the board game rules. My name is Branislav Berec, and in this video we're going to learn how to play the game called Carnegie from Javier Jorges. I hope that's the correct pronunciation. The game is published by Quinnet Games and the Pegasus Spiele. To set the game up, place the game board in the middle of the table. Shuffle these timeline tiles, randomly draw 4 of them, then in a random order arrange them like this, and since the tiles are double-sided, you can also randomly choose which side of each tile you're going to use in the game. Then frame these selected timeline tiles with these start and end tiles, and you can return the remaining tiles back to the box. They will not be used in the game. Then place these action markers on their designated spaces, and place this timeline marker nearby. Shuffle these department tiles and randomly remove certain number of tiles from the game based on the player count. I'm going to set up a 3-player game, so I need to remove 8 tiles from the game. Then take all the remaining tiles and arrange them like shown here. Ideally, the order of these department types should match the order of the department types on the timeline. And since you remove certain number of department tiles from the game, it may happen that certain departments will not be available at all, certain departments will only have 1 tile available, and others will have both tiles available. Then each player chooses a color and takes the player board of the same color. For project tabs, 1 tab of each color, and again, these tabs are double-sided, so you can choose any side you want. In this video I'm going to use A sides on all the project tabs. Then slide these tabs under the player board so that only this rightmost space remains visible. Then take 12 money, 4 good cubes, or I call them material cubes. Then 5 employees, 1 in each of these starting departments on your company board. And note, in this HR department, this space is blocked for the rest of the game with a permanent employee. And then 5 more employees lying down here in the lobby. Set the remaining employees aside, you will be able to acquire them over the course of the game. Then take your player discs, and 3 of them are placed on these initial spaces on your project tabs next to your company board. Then 1 disc on the first space of each of these 4 regional transportation tracks, and 1 disc on the 0 space of the scoring track. Randomly determine the starting player who will receive this first player marker. And in a 4-player game, each player receives this action choice tile. In a 3-player game, only the last player in the player order would receive it, and in a 2-player game, these tiles are not used. Then only in a 2 and a 3-player game, you will need to place the neutral markers on the map to populate some of the spaces. In a 2-player game, you will need to use 18 discs, in a 3-player game only 9 discs. To do that, you will need these cards for a solo game. Shuffle the deck, then reveal the first card, and place 1 disc on this space on the donation chart. In this example, it's this donation space, so 1 of the discs would be placed here, and then 1 disc on each city stated in this 3rd white line on the card. In this case it's St. Louis and Chicago. You always place these discs in the leftmost unoccupied space. Then draw the next card from the deck and repeat the process, and continue like this until all discs are placed on the game board. Then in the reverse player order, so from the last player to the first player, each player places their disc from this housing project on the game board, on any empty space on this large major city or these smaller medium cities, and it must be a space with this matching housing icon. Together with placing the disc on the map, the player chooses 1 of the departments available in the display and places that department into their personal reserve. This is going to be the first department you will add to your company board. Now, starting with the first player and then continuing in the player order in a clockwise direction, each player may move their employees from the lobby up to 6 steps on their company board to new departments. When you move an employee, you must always move it horizontally or vertically. You may never move it diagonally. So one step is moving from one department to another, or from lobby to a neighboring department. So here this would be 1, 2, 3 steps, 4, 5, and let's say 6. Then you may activate those inactive lying employees. By activating, you stand them up. If there is no cost associated with that, you can do it for free. If there is some cost associated, you have to pay that cost. In this example, it would be 2 money for this employee. This one is for free, and again for this one you would have to pay 3 money. This initial movement and activation is very important, so before you actually do that in your game, I would highly recommend to watch the entire tutorial before you make this initial movement and activation. Each player represents a Carnegie company, running the company, having their own employees and their departments, trying to get resources and materials so that they can build the project, meaning various commercial, industrial, public or housing buildings on the map of the United States. In addition to that, players will make donations and thus contribute to the greatness of the country, and with that players will gain victory points. The game is played over 20 rounds, and each round has 4 phases. In the first phase, the active player will choose the timeline role, and that will determine the event that will take place and also the department that players will be able to use during that round. There are 2 types of events in the game. This one allows players to make donations, and with this one players take income. Donations are the source of victory points at the end of the game. Then in the third phase, in the player order, players will use the designated departments on their company board. With this HR department, you will be able to move employees from one department to another. With these management departments, you will usually gain cubes, resources and money. With this construction department, you will place buildings on the map. And with this research and development department or departments, you will be able to slide these project tabs and develop new projects which you can then build on the map. And you will also be able to move your discs on these transportation tracks, which increases your income. Finally, with this management department, you will also be able to place more departments on your company board. And if you move your employees during your turn, at the end of your turn, you will be able to activate them. So that's the very brief overview of all the department types. But in the given round, you can only use the department which was chosen by the first player. The game ends after 20 rounds, and you will score victory points from buildings on the map. Each disc is worth victory points equal to the value of that city. And if you connect these major cities with this link symbol, and by connecting I mean you will have the uninterrupted line of your buildings, then you can score a bonus points based on this table over here and based on the position of your markers on these transportation tracks. Then you will score victory points from donations, and you will score victory points for your active employees in your company. Then all the departments you build over the course of the game, these are the victory points for each of those departments. And you will also score these endgame scoring victory points on the project tabs if you develop those project tabs. And then the player with the most victory points is the winner. The first phase of each round is selecting the timeline row. It is selected by the current first player. And that player takes this gear marker and places it on any selected timeline, on any row. You can place it on the first unoccupied space, or you can place it at the end of the track. That basically doesn't matter. This gear indicates the row that was selected by the first player. Selecting the row in the timeline triggers the event in the next available space behind the action marker. And as I said, it determines the department that players will use this round. If later in the game you want to choose the row where the action marker is already on the last space on that timeline row, you can still do it. Place the gear marker to the right of the action marker. That will determine the department for the current round, so the HR department will be triggered in this case. However, the event is triggered from the next row from the next available space. You would flip the action marker in that row to indicate that this is the event that will take place. And in case, if even this marker would be already on the last space, you would go to the next row, flip that marker and trigger this event. However, even if this event would be triggered, players will only be able to use this department. In the second step of the round, the event is triggered. There are two types of events, income and donations. So let's start with the income first. The timeline marker activates one region, one area. In this case, it's Midwest. At the start of the game, you will have no employees in this mission area of the region, but later in the game, you will or you may have employees there. And if the event is triggered, for each employee that you return from this mission area back to your lobby, you will generate income based on the position of your marker on this transportation track. So for each employee here, you would generate 2 money. The returned employee is placed lying down in your lobby. You may return all the employees, but you don't have to. It may be beneficial to intentionally leave some employees there. If you recover at least one of your employees from that mission area, you also receive income from all the projects you have built so far in the game. So those are all these circular spaces with this orange exclamation mark. In this example, you would score 1 victory point immediately. You would gain 1 material cube or goods cube, and you would also gain 5 money. You take this income only once, regardless of how many employees you returned from the mission area. But since this can be a pretty substantial income, and you see that the same mission area will be triggered soon again, you may decide to leave some employees in that mission area, not only for the income from that transportation track, but mainly due to the income from your already built projects. The second type of event are these donations. Starting with the first player and continuing clockwise, each player may place one of their discs on any empty space in this donation chart, and the first of your discs that is placed in this donation chart costs 5 money. Later in the game, when you place your second disc, it would cost 10 money. When you would place your third disc, it would cost 15 money, then 20, and so on and so forth. These donation spaces provide victory points at the end of the game, however each space can only give you maximum 12 victory points. One last note, when you trigger the last space on the timeline row, both of those events are triggered, so players take income and they can also make donations. Then in the third step of the round, after the events are resolved, players may activate the selected department. In this example, it would be this HR department. Starting with the first player and then continuing in a clockwise direction, each player may activate all the departments of the selected type. Only after one player completes their turn, the next player can start their turn. You can use the department once for each standing employee. Note that this specific HR department has one permanent, active, standing employee, and then you can have additional 2 more active standing employees. You may use your departments in any order you want, but first you must completely resolve one department before you use another. Using your employees is optional, you don't have to use them if you don't want to. These inactive employees that are lying down, are not trained yet, so they don't work in that department yet. You may not use them. Finally, after you use the employees, they remain active. You don't have to lie them down, they still remain active. Although in some cases, like over here, they will be sent on a mission. I will talk about that in just a minute. I'm not going to describe every single department in the game, you will find that description in the rulebook. However, I'm going to explain at least these basic starting departments. And we will start with this HR. When you use this basic HR department, it allows you to reassign employees to new departments on your company board. As I said, there is one permanent active employee, so when you use it, you always have at least 3 moves available, because each arrow here gives you one move, orthogonal move of 1 space. And when you use this department, calculate the number of moves at the start of that turn. So here I would have 6 moves. You can move the same employee more than once, but always orthogonally. You may move that employee even to an empty space on your company board. You can move through departments with other employees. There are unlimited number of inactive employees which can be placed in one department. However, there is only limited number of active employees in each department. Since you calculate this number of moves at the start of your turn, if you move this employee elsewhere, you don't lose those moves that were calculated at the start of the turn. Now, after you move the employee, it becomes inactive. Even if it was active previously, it always goes to the inactive state. It means the employee must be trained first to be active in that new department. When using these management departments, here you can gain cubes, material or goods cubes, and money. If you decide to use this action, you can either gain 3 money or 1 cube. However, if you decide to use this part, you have to send an employee on a mission. That's this symbol. To do that, you have to take that employee and move it to any of these 4 mission areas on the game board. Only then you can take the effect, so in this case you would gain either 6 money or 2 goods cubes. Then, if you would have active employees in this department, you can place new departments on your company board. You can do this or this part, not both. When you do this one, you have to pay 1 cube. Then you can choose any available department from the display, but you must place it on the space on your company board which already contains an inactive employee. So for example here, the employee still stays inactive. If instead you would choose this part of the action, you would have to pay 2 material cubes, and you may place the new department in any empty space on your company board. However, at the start of the game, the player chooses one of the departments available in the display, and this is going to be the first department you will add to your company board. One last note, you may never build 2 same departments on your company board. The only exception is this department. It's the same as your starting department, but since you only built 1 such department, you can do that. You would not be able to build the second one of the same type, but you may have the same starting and 1 build department of the same type. Then with this production department, you can send employees to a mission and then build projects, build buildings on the map. So to use the department, you have to send that employee on a mission, then choose any mission area on the game board, place the employee there, and you can build one of your projects. So you can take one of the disks from this area on your company board, let's say this one, and place it on any empty space with the matching icon in the same area, in the same region. So in this example, it will be the housing project in the East region. To do that, you have to pay the cost associated with that building. In this case, it would be 1 cube. If you would build a building from these spaces, from these project bars, you would have to pay 2 material cubes. By the way, when you take this action or similar actions, you may take any disk from your project tabs, and when you have more than 1 disk on the tab, you always have to take the rightmost one. When you decide to build in a region and you place your disk in the small city with this symbol, you immediately take the income from the transportation track. So in this example it would be 2 money, and as you can see, you can place any disk on this space. It can be any type of project. And when you build a building in this space, in this kind of a small city, you don't get anything, no rewards. However, those spaces may be very important for making the uninterrupted connections between the major cities. And finally, with these R&D departments, you can develop new projects on your project tabs, or you can improve your position on these transportation tracks. When these R&D departments are triggered, you get these study points, and for each employee you get that amount of study points. So in this example I would gain 3 plus 3 plus 4, that is 10 study points together. And then you can distribute them among the project tabs and the transportation tracks in any way you want. To move the project tab one space to the right, you have to pay the study points shown on the last visible space. So in this example it would be 1 study point, and then immediately place a new disk on the revealed space. If you want, you can develop the next space again for 1 study point and again place another disk on the new space. And for example, I can develop another space here that would be 2 study points and another disk. I spent 4 study points so far. Now, in order to move your disk from one space on the transportation track to another, you have to pay this number of study points. So this would be 3. Then I can continue with another 2, and so on until you spend all the study points. If you have still any study points available and there is no way you can use them because everything is too expensive, those study points are lost. When you reach the last space on the transportation track, as indicated over here, the last space can only contain 1 disk, and that player immediately receives the bonus shown here. And one additional hint, if you want to know what are the additional rewards on the project tab which is not visible, you can always look over here on the project tab, it shows all the rewards. If you are not happy with the selection of the department that first player chooses, only in a 4-player game and only 1 player in a 3-player game can use their action token. To use the action token, simply flip it to the other side. You can only use it once per game, and instead of the department chosen by the first player, you can choose any department, whichever department you want. In the last phase, the 4th phase of the round, regardless of which department was selected by the first player, each player may now activate any inactive employees on their company board. This is optional. If there is any activation cost on the department, you have to pay that cost. In this case it would be 3 money, here 1 and here 5. If you don't want to activate an employee, you obviously don't pay the cost. So for activating these 2 employees I would pay 4 money. Again, just to reiterate, each department can only hold 1 active employee per 1 workstation shown and any number of inactive employees. With that, the round is over. Only now remove the gear marker and move the action marker to the next space. Then move the first player token to the next player clockwise, and you can start the next round. The game ends at the end of 20 rounds. Note that since players can also activate departments where the action marker is on the last space of the timeline row, which makes the action marker in the next row move 1 space to the right at the end of that round, some departments may be triggered more often than other departments. However, there's still only 20 rounds in the game. So once those 20 rounds are over, players move to the final scoring. First, score the connections based on the table at the top right corner of the game board. Those are connections between the major cities with this link symbol. That's New York, New Orleans, Chicago and San Francisco. To have a connection, you must have those cities connected with an uninterrupted line of your buildings. So here we have the blue player who linked New Orleans with New York and also Chicago. The same for the yellow player, 2 links from San Francisco and 1 link in New Orleans. So there is 3 links as well. Then look at the lowest level of your transportation. There are 3 levels, red, orange and green. For example, the yellow player reached green areas in all these 3 transportation areas. However, in this one, the yellow player is still in the orange area, so that orange is the lowest level. And since the yellow player has 3 links with the orange lowest level is 12 victory points for the yellow player. Do those calculations for all players. Then score victory points for each of your projects built For each disc in a city, score the victory points shown on that city. Here will be 3 victory points, 2 victory points. Over here it's 1 victory point. Then score the victory points for all your donations. Again, you can find their description in the rulebook. However, unless specified differently, from each space you can gain maximum 12 victory points. And then, if you still have the action choice tile, unused action choice tile, you score 3 victory points. Then you score 1 victory point for each of your active employees at the end of the game, not for the inactive. And it's only for the employees on your company board, not on the map. Then you score victory points for all the departments you've built over the course of the game. In the first 3 rows, the departments are worth 2 victory points. If you would have any departments in the top row, you would score 3 victory points for each. Then, if you have any endgame victory points on your project tabs, you score them also. In this case, it's 1 + 2 + 2, 5 victory points. And by the way, these are endgame victory points. You don't score these when you return employees from the mission to your lobby and you gain income from your project. And that's it, you don't get any victory points from your money or material. Then sum up your points and the player with the most points is the winner. So that's how you play Carnegie. If you would have any questions or comments, I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. If you like the series, please subscribe. You can even support the channel on the Patreon page. My name is Branislav Berec. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell and hope to see you next time. I would like to thank everyone who has ever supported the channel, and especially the current supporters listed on this page. If you too would like to support the channel in creation of videos like this and other video tutorials and other content on this channel, please visit the patreon.com/Nithrania.